Hello everyone, it's Tony. Today I'm going to talk about what I learned from the journal, Epenthentic Vowels in Japanese, a Perceptual Illusion. So here's my table of contents. The overview, examples of speech perception, the experiment 1, and a conclusion. So, about a few weeks ago, when I was looking for some research to solve the problem of my assignment, I found this journal. In this journal, the authors want to know about the reason why Japanese cannot distinguish whether a word that has epenthentic vowels or not, and they take 4 experiments to prove their hypothesis. Today, in my presentation, I would like to focus on one of the 4 experiments because of the time limit, and also I think that the first experiment is the most related to the question above. So, before talking about the experiment, we have to take a look at the main point of this journal, which is perception. Originally, perception means that the ability to see, to hear, or to become aware of something through the senses. In SLA, the perception can also mean that the ability to find the differences between your mother language and the language you're learning as your second language. So, to talk about this perception, we have to look at some examples of speech perception to know deeper about it. So the first example I would like to show is the Japanese problem. So, according to what the authors say that speakers of a given language often have trouble distinguishing non-distinctive phones. For example, Japanese listeners map the American law and R phones onto their own single R category, and therefore have trouble discriminating them. So, for example, right and light, or red or lead, or road or load. For Japanese, they think that these 3 examples are the same. They cannot distinguish it because of their language system. So let's look at the second example. It's also an Japanese problem. So Japanese language disallows complex consonant clusters. So what is this? Let's take loan words, for example. Loan words are the words of foreign origin that were changed to conform to the Japanese pattern. Japanese adds u or o to the words that are not the combination of consonant and vowel, or the pairs of them. And the reason why they do so is because it's easier for them to pronounce these words. People may ask that why is that only u and o can be added as a way to help them pronounce the words. And the reason is that both of them are closed, back, rounded vowel. And this kind of vowel is easy for Japanese to pronounce according to their language system. So this is the second problem. And this is also what the authors want to know the most. So let's take a look at the third problem, the Spanish one. In Spanish, plus consonant clusters are always preceded by a vowel, and we have informally heard reports by Spanish speakers who maintain that they hear that vowel E preceding English words that begin with an ch clusters. Accordingly, many Spanish speakers of English sometimes produce especial instead of special, a stimulus instead of stimulus, a sport instead of sport, and so on. In the author's point of view, this has nothing to do with the phonemic categories of and E in Spanish versus English. Instead, it seems to depend on a Spanish-specific phonetic property. And let's look at the last example of speech perception, which was Chinese problem. So Chinese cannot distinguish p and p in French, but it's like bath, p is like bread. So the reason is that we only have unaspirated voiceless p, like by, and aspirated voiceless f, like pi, in our language. What we lack is that the negative voice onset time in our language, so that we cannot distinguish b and p in French. So these are the 4 examples of speech perception. So before officially entering the part of the experiment part, we have first take a look the method the authors take advantage of to do the experiment. So it's called identification test. So what is it? Identification tests are a broad category of tests intended to verify the presence of a specific element, functional group, or compound. So this is the experiment 1. Its aim is to assess the extent of the epenthentic effect. The hypothesis the authors made is that if the epenthentic effect has a perceptual basis, Japanese participants should report the presence of U more often than French listeners. So the method they adopt is to find 10 Japanese and 10 French native volunteers to attend this experiment. And in the training station, they used an identification test. Participants were told that there are 2 different phonemes, p and b, and were instructed to listen to the minimal pair through earphones and judge what they just heard. Each participant heard the same word 3 times, and then they had 4 seconds to respond to the question. The task aimed at whether they can distinguish the sounds p and b. So this is the result. We can tell from the graph that French, they are able to differentiate between abso and abuso more than Japanese group. French people can present vowel in 50% of the cases, while for the Japanese people, they judged that the vowel was present at all levels of vowel length, which was a wrong observation, and it also shows that they present vowel in more than 70% of the cases, and this just shows that they cannot distinguish them at all. So this is about so this experiment just proves the author's hypothesis when they are making this experiment. So this is all about the experiment. So to sum up, in today's presentation, we talk about the overview of this journal and the problem the authors want to solve. Also, we look at the experiment they had done to find the answer. In my point of view, I think that the main point of this journal, which is the concept of perception, really helped me in realizing why is that some people have that difficulties in learning a specific language. Also, the relationship between 2 languages can also be an obstacle for people to learn their L2. So this is all about my presentation. Thanks for listening.